Welcome to today's webinar on buying, living, relocating and investing in France. Thank you all for taking the time to join us, whether it's the morning, afternoon or evening for you, wherever you're joining us. Over the next hour or so, we'll be covering the key property, financial and practical considerations for anyone thinking about buying in France, or if you want to relocate, invest in that market. If you're already making plans or if you're simply exploring your options, our aim here today is to give you some practical guidance to help you plan your move. We've brought together today a great lineup of specialists covering French property, relocation and administration, tax and wealth planning, mortgages and currency exchange. So you have access to experts insight across every stage of the journey. Let me introduce you first to today's panel. We've got Alice Watson-Smith, who is our French property expert at Fine & Country France, Tracy Leonetti, who is a relocation and French administration expert at LBS in France, Thomas Maron, tax and wealth planning expert at Blevins Frank, Chris Lloyd, mortgages and finance expert at NS Global, Steve Eakins, currency expert at Le Monde, and myself, Emily Despois. I'm your host for today. Throughout today's session, you can submit questions using the Q&A function, and we'll answer as many questions as possible during the live Q&A. However, we have received quite a significant number of questions already. We'll do our best to go through these, but if we don't have the time to go through your questions today, our experts will contact you separately by email after this session. A couple of housekeeping points before we start. Today's webinar is being recorded and a copy will be sent to everyone who registered, so there's no need for you to take notes. And finally, a brief disclaimer. Today's discussion is for general information purposes only and does not constitute financial, tax, legal, or immigration advice. Everyone's circumstances are different, so we do always encourage to seek independent professional advice before making any decisions. And you will have access to our experts' contact details at the end of the session as well in the follow-up, so do not hesitate to contact them for your specialist question. And so without further ado, let's start the webinar with some of the first questions, and we'll start with Alice, talking about the French property market. So Alice, first of all, what buyers should know before they start searching for their property?
Or where we're based, which is the French Riviera. And hello everyone on the webinar, welcome. What I would say to really begin with, and this is for people starting out their search, is the France itself and the French Riviera as well, of course, is so varied. Prices vary massively, properties vary massively. So while a lot of buyers might come here thinking, well, I'm going to buy something on the French Riviera, it's such a big area. Choose a location first. What you can do for that is really think about your own lifestyle needs, your own lifestyle, your day-to-day lifestyle as a family, or for investment, for example, as well. And from there, speak to someone who can help point you in the right direction of what kind of properties and which location will suit what you're actually looking for. It will save you a lot of time. Budget, of course, will come into it because it varies vastly from town to town, inland, coastal. So that will save you a lot of time to really focus from the beginning. That would be my first piece of advice for those starting out their search, and get some help and to consider as well locations that you might not have heard of, that are worth considering either for value or because they have a particular kind of property that might suit the buyer that is looking.
And I'm guessing you have a big team of people who are specialists in different areas on the French Riviera. And you
Emily,
would
I'm
be
not hearing you
with,
very well.
oh,
Can you repeat?
can you hear me? Sorry, can you
Yeah,
hear me? Yeah. So obviously you've got a specialist team in your office, and they're all specialized in their own area, which is fantastic because they really have a deep knowledge. I guess the best way for people from overseas or who do not know the area very well would be to contact you first, and you would be able, considering their lifestyle and their budget, to advise them as to what the best place would be to for them to be.
absolutely. And it'll save a lot of time. It's a big area. There's a lot available. So saving time when searching, especially if you're coming from overseas to look, is for me the first place to start.
Yeah. And so, for overseas buyer, what would you say the current market looks like in France and on the French Riviera in particular?
It's an active market in all budgets and all styles of properties, both investment properties, which is of course generally more in Cannes, where our office is based and around Cannes on the coast, but also inland and second homes, holiday homes. So the international kind of buyer market at the moment is relatively strong. The activity is there. I was explaining to the panel just before we began the conversation that I've been on visits in the last few days with varied nationalities, from Australians to Dutch to Lebanese living in Africa. I mean, really is a varied buyer pool at the moment, and a lot of activity. So that's it's positive for the area. It's positive for the property market as well.
And in terms of UK buyers, any particular areas that are favored by UK buyers?
It depends very much on the buyer and what they're looking for. So investment wise, they tend to stick to Cannes. Cannes is a location that UK buyers have always liked. It's easy to get to. The return on investment is of course interesting as well. So that's your investment buyer from the UK. If they're looking for second homes, there are areas around Cannes, notably, for example, the Mougins area and Valbonne, Grasse, and then all the way into Provence. So it depends on the buyer profile really and what they're looking for. But it's an area that's always attracted UK buyers, and it's set up for it. It's a relatively kind of straightforward process. If you have someone guiding you through it who knows it, it's a relatively straightforward process in France. In spite of what people might hear and think, as long as you've got the somebody guiding you through it and a group such as the ones here today, it's an entirely doable project to purchase in France as a UK buyer.
Yes, that the additional bonus that you have as well is that I say the entirety of your team is also English speaker, so it
Great.
does help.
Yeah, everyone's bilingual, including notaries and all the business contacts we have as well. So there's bilingual French and English, which really helps with the communication side of things.
And so once someone has found the area that they're interested in and they're looking at a few different properties, what costs and fees should a buyer take into consideration on top of the property price?
The main cost to take into consideration is what's called notary fees in France. And I think that translates as stamp duty for those in the UK, stamp duties. To be clear, when we say notary fees, it's not just the fees to the notary. So they're the transaction costs that include taxes and includes the notary's fees as well. But it's really the entire transaction costs. They're paid for by the buyer on top of purchase price, and it's around about 7.5% on top of purchase price. The real estate fees, real estate agent fees are paid for in general by the seller, and they're included in the prices that you will be seeing online. So each party takes care of well, one seller takes care of the agent, and the buyer takes care of the notary and transaction fees. And that's the major purchase cost. Afterwards, if you're doing renovation, etc., there will be additional cost, but that's really on a personal case-by-case basis. The main is the 7.5% on top of purchase price.
And actually, thank you for answering that question. Actually, I saw a question from a customer, but from the opposite, who said, well, if I buy a property in France, but then go to sell it, what would be the fees from selling that property? And so that would be the estate agency fee, effectively.
Correct. And there are a couple of reports that need to be done, a technical survey, it's called a diagnostic report, wastewater reports, but all of those together come to a few €100. So it's not a huge cost when putting your property on the market in France.
Okay. And what should someone who look at investing in a property in France know before they start investing in that property?
Someone looking to invest in France, it's all going to be about location. If they're wanting a return on investment, i.e. classic investment, it's all going to be about location. I come back to the fact that Cannes itself is really a hot spot for that. The reason being that you don't rely only on rental income in the summer months, which would be the case, for example, villas, which is great for covering some costs. In Cannes, in addition to summer kind of holiday rentals, you have a congress market of rentals. So Cannes is a well-known city around the world for the congresses and festivals that it attracts, which include, of course, the Cannes Film Festival, but also Cannes Lions, which is the biggest advertising festival in the world. We have MIPIM, which is real estate, and many others. And properties in Cannes rent very well for these congresses because the hotels don't have enough rooms, in essence. So what that means is, for investors, they can rent holiday rentals, of course, as any other town or location, but also congress rentals, which reach peak per night rates with minimal wear and tear. So it's a really good option. There are other options as well, but to answer your question, for investors, it's really going to come down to location.
I'm
not hearing you very well.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, as a foreigner, I'm out of the country and I'm renting my property. Can you help with the management of my property?
We can. So there are two sides to it. There's an administrative rental side, which is really kind of the on-the-ground, day-to-day management of the property. If there's a water leak, for example, the insurance claims, dealing with the body corporates. So that can be taken care of, and short-term rentals as well, which are managed short-term rentals with meet and greets and linen, etc. We've got all the contacts for that in place.
Fantastic. And so going back into buying, what would be the most common stumbling blocks or pitfalls that you see buyers will run into?
It's a bit of a running theme, and I started on this, but if buyers don't know where they want to buy, it can become a long and confusing process. So, and it's only because I've witnessed this many times, that there really should be a focus on where you want to buy, depending on budget and lifestyle choices again, because otherwise, what we've seen in the past sometimes is people really want to buy, but they're looking within an hour and a half of various locations, and it takes up a lot of time. Decisions are not then made. It transfers to the next visit or next year. So for me, that's and I've touched on it already, but for me, that's a point really to consider for people. When it comes to real pitfalls in the process, I've been doing this for 14 years now, dealing predominantly with international clients, and I say this genuinely, that I don't feel there are pitfalls. If you're well prepared and organized and have the right people around you advising you on the purchase, my personal opinion is there are no pitfalls to purchasing in France. It just needs to be well structured. You need to be well surrounded with professionals around you, and then there aren't pitfalls to the purchase process.
And going back to fees, there was a question from someone as well. Obviously, you incur costs when you purchase a property or when you sell that property, but are there any ongoing costs in between in having a property in
In
France that
owning,
people in particular should owning, yeah, should consider?
there are annual taxes, which is a bit I forget what you call it in the UK exactly, but we have two annual taxes. One is called the taxe foncière, and it's like a land tax, if you will, and the other is a habitation tax, which applies to secondary residences, not primary residences. So secondary residences, investment properties, and those are annual taxes. They're not as high as people might think. If I just off the top of my head think of a 2-bedroom apartment in Cannes, the two taxes together might be about 3,000 to 4,000 euros a year, depending on the size of the property. So they're not massive. And that's basically one takes care of rates and one is your land tax. And then for purchases over 1.3 million, and some of my colleagues on the call will be better placed to advise on this, but purchases over 1.3 million, of course, then it falls into the wealth tax category. So there are things that can be done to mitigate that. And again, both Tom and Chris, I think, can advise more on that. But that would otherwise be another annual cost to take into consideration. And then your normal utilities.
I think people were after maybe the more maybe unusual taxes and things like this that
Yeah.
they should be aware of. Um, Thank you so much, Alice. Let's go. And obviously, if anyone wants to start looking in France and you want to know a bit more about the beautiful French Riviera, all the different type of properties that are there as well available, and the different lifestyle, absolutely amazing lifestyle, then contact Alice and her team, and they'll be able to help you. But obviously, a lot of you will think about some of the paperwork that comes with relocating to France. So we'll go over to Tracy, who will be the lady that will help with that. So, Tracy, what are the main visa and residency routes for someone relocating to France from the UK?
So yeah, quite a big question in the fact that really the best way to start when thinking about moving to France from the UK or any non-European country is, what is the object of the move? You know, why are you moving to France? A bit like with Alice on the location for buying. When we're talking about visas, for me, it's about what is the object of your move? Are you retiring? Are you wanting to work? Are you want to be salaried? You know, are you married to a French person, or do you have an EU passport? You know, as in married to an EU passport. So there's lots of reasons for moving to France. So the first question I usually ask my clients is, okay, why are you moving to France and what's your timeline? But for this purpose, I will give a slight overview. So there's your short stay visas and long stay visas. Short stay visas, of course, is really the category of those people who are not looking to live permanently in France. So for your second home owners and your investment properties, then short stay could be either just your 9180, or it could be a 6-month visa for non-residency. So short stay would be a 6 month or your 9180. Then you go into a whole plethora of long stay visas. Long stay visas for those people who want to live permanently in France, and then that's where the reason is why you come into France. So you want to be here permanently, but what are you going to do in France? So are you going to be retired, in which case a long stay visitors visa? Are you going to be inactive? Again, a long stay visitors visa. Do you want to have a business? Are you going to be bringing your expertise to France and work? In which case, there could be a different category. It could be a liberal visa or it could be a talents visa, depending on your level of expertise and study. You also have the category of, the EU spousal visa. So if you happen to be a British person married to an EU passport holder, then you can have an EU spouse, and that is a little bit easier to go through once you're in France. And of course, you have what I call family visas if you're married to a French national, and you would need to have a visa for that to France. So there is quite a different panoply, if you like, of visas. I think what's important to say is if you want to spend more than 90 days in 180, you are going to need a visa, and it's the reason why you come into France needs to be discussed, and then the right visa process and the right path and solution can be found. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. Basically, find yourself a French person and marry them. Should I say that?
Actually, it's interesting that the marriage of French person doesn't always make it quicker. It makes it you get a longer residency card at the end, but the process itself is still quite arduous.
It's still quite hard. So the other question, which I think you actually answered, is: are there any restrictions on how long someone can live in France full time, and how do those work in practice?
So yeah, certainly I touched on it briefly, the 9180 rule, of course. So there is a limitation as a UK passport holder, a British passport holder, again, non-European passport holder. Then you've got only 90 days in every 180. So that is a counting, rolling window where you have to literally think about how much time you're in France and then count the days. So that 9180 is a restrictive. And if you want to benefit from more, I'll have more flexibility on that 9180 without becoming a resident, then the 6-month tourist visa is the way to go.
Okay. And so what are changes that people have seen since Brexit?
So Brexit was had a huge impact on the British, of course, and it continues, because right now we're going through a lot of the renewals of Brexit card holders, as they're called, warp cards, withdrawal agreement, residency permit. So really the big changes is that unless you are a holder of the warp card, i.e. you was in France before the end of the transition period and managed to get the warp card, everybody else is treated very much like a third country national. So you have the same rules applied now to British passport holders that are applied to Americans, Australians and South Africans. So it's been a bit of a shock for many British people who was hoping that that rule would be slightly adjusted for them or a bit more flexible, but it is not in any way more flexible. You are treated the same way as a third country national, which means, as I said, you need to have a visa if you want to spend more than 90 days out of 180 in France. It also means that residency is no longer automatic. So if you want, whereas pre-Brexit, you could come to France, spend a bit of time, decide you want to stay and just stay. Now you have to go through that visa process. And once you have your visa in place, either you apply for, say, a long stay visitor's visa because you wish to retire to France, the visa brings you into France, but then you have to apply for your residency card once you are in France, or go through the renewal process, which then issues you with a residency card. So that's no longer automatic. There has to be an action from your part for that. Healthcare, of course. again, you have access to healthcare as a resident, but it's not automatic. You have to apply for it. You may also have to change and exchange your driving license as a British person. So whereas when you was part of the EU, your British driving license you could use and you didn't have to exchange it. Now, much like Americans and every other non-EU passport holder, you have to exchange it within that first year. But of course, there are more bumps in the road for British passport holders than there was before Brexit. But I can assure everybody who's watching this, either live or on the replay, there is always solutions. We've helped thousands of people go through these processes before Brexit and after Brexit. And many people are now living happily in France with either their not retirement visas or business visas. It just means there's a few more hoops to jump through now than there were before.
That's quite all right. I had to jump through some myself, being a French national in the UK. I think there's a bit of a ping pong playing in between. In terms of driving, to be fair, I don't think it's a bad thing, because no one wants to see me drive in the UK. You guys are on the wrong side of the road. So in terms of actually a question that I don't think anybody asked, but I'm actually quite curious. In terms of, I'm sure you have the answer. In terms of visas, what are the costs of the visas approximately?
Visas themselves, to apply online, you don't necessarily pay. You pay for your appointment, of course, and depending which country you're applying from, those costs can be quite high. You have the appointment fees per person, and including for children as well. You have the visa fee once you're at the visa centre, which is the equivalent of 99 euros. Then once you are in France, and the validation process takes place in France, so you have to validate that you have a visa online, and that costs, it's just gone up. For visitors visas, it's 300 euros per adult, and for liberal business visas, it's 225 euros per visa. And then of course, when you get to the renewal process at month 8, there is a fee, and that's usually around about 225 euros as well.
Okay, interesting costs. And in terms of healthcare, how does someone go about assessing the level of healthcare available, and how does the S1 form fit into that?
Okay, so two things there, healthcare and S1. So healthcare itself, first of all, once you are a resident of France and come in with a visa and get into the system, then you have the same level and same access to healthcare as everybody else. You have to go through the process, and of course, visas, the healthcare will help you with all of that. How to assess the level? It's about a bit like what Alice was saying on the property side of things about the research. So obviously, when you're looking at your property and you're looking for location, healthcare is an important criteria for many people moving to France, and the system is very good, but we do have areas which have more GPs than other areas. So you need to research, where your nearest hospital might be, the local GP practices. Look on the local Facebook groups and get some information about what the waiting times are. So a lot of expatriates who are already in the area that you're moving to will have some feedback for you. The quality of care, in my opinion, doesn't change. Where you may have some delays, if you're in the real rural areas, then of course you've got less access to GPs than if you're living in Cannes, for example, or on Tibor, Juan-les-Pins on the Côte d'Azur. So a bit of research is needed, depending on how far away from the local hospitals and GPs. From the S1 perspective, the S1, for those that you don't know, S1 is basically a portability document, and it's given to people who are retired and in receipt of retirement pension from the UK. So anybody who's of retirement age and is getting state pension, they can request an S1 form from the Department of Health and Pensions. This helps in many ways. One, it avoids you having to take private healthcare to come into France, because private healthcare is one of the criteria to come into France. And if you have an S1 form, you don't need to have private healthcare. You can if you choose to have it, but it's not obligatory. It also helps you from the accessing the healthcare affiliation, because you don't have to wait 3 months. You can apply straight away. And also from a tax perspective, and I think anybody on the call tonight, and maybe Tom might be able to help, but from a tax perspective, you have reduced social contributions as the holder of an S1. So S1 doesn't really affect what level of healthcare or access to healthcare. It just benefits you from a financial perspective from private healthcare and the timelines for getting affiliated with the French healthcare system. And of course, all of these questions, if it's a bit complicated, reach out afterwards. Of course, everybody at the team at LBS can help you with this.
S1 you said is available for retirees only.
Yes, people who are in receipt of state pension, basically.
Pension. Okay.
Yeah.
And just one quick last one for you, if you can be very brief, is what's the biggest misconception people have about relocating to France?
Oh, so I would say, and I'm hoping Alice would agree with me with this, is about moving to France is all about finding the property, which I think it is. A lot of people say, I'm moving to France, I want to live my best life, I can't wait, I'm excited. And the challenge is finding the right property, the right location. And it's a huge thing to do, is to find the right property. And with the help of Alice and her team, that's how you can get that support. However, it's not just about finding the property, because a lot of people who come to me, it's like, well, what if I buy my property, but then I don't get the right visa? Or, what if the visa isn't accepted? So it's all about a whole planning phase. It's not just about the property, it's the whole relocation that has to be looked before you come to France, in my opinion. So, moving to France is a project that takes many months to prepare. It's not something you decide. Many people spend years looking for the right property, location, but also in parallel, okay, why am I moving to France? What is my needs going to be once I'm in France? So it's about really planning the move before you come to France.
Thank you so much, Tracy. That was really insightful, and it's a great introduction to Tom, who will talk us about tax and wealth planning. So here we go, planning. So obviously some of you will also think about taxes and tax implication and wealth planning as well. So Tom, for someone who would become a French tax resident, what would change financially for them?
Yeah, I think a lot changes financially. I mean, the big thing to consider is that once you become a French tax resident, it's your worldwide gains and your worldwide income that are assessed for French tax. A lot of people don't realize that. They assume that if they've got pensions and investments in the UK, that those will stay in the UK and it's nothing to do with the French tax system. That's not the case. As I say, the French authorities are interested in taxing your worldwide wealth. A lot of people kind of fall into the trap of assuming that the French tax system is going to be the same or very similar to the UK or other systems, in the country that they might have moved from. There are some similarities, because in France we have kind of banded rates of tax. You have progressive rates of tax depending on the level of income. But in France, what's different when compared to the UK system, you also have a flat tax that applies to investment income. In France, we have a wealth tax, as Alice mentioned before, which applies to property. We don't have that in the UK, at least not at the moment. The French succession system is completely different to the UK inheritance system. So in France, we have a system of forced heirship. If you've got kids, then they are they may be considered your protected heirs. And you have much lower tax allowances in France, tax-free allowances, when it comes to inheritance as well. So these are kind of the areas that we normally suggest if somebody's moving to France, do some planning, speak to us, to Blevins Franks, to me, because these are the kind of things that we can really help with in terms of getting it right and making sure that you're ready to move over to the French system.
So at what point do you become a French tax resident then?
The point where you become a French tax resident is generally when you set foot in France with the intention of permanently residing there. So for some people that may be a bit of a grey area, you know, if they've got homes in both places. But yeah, that's generally considered the start of somebody's French residency. And as a rule of thumb, if somebody's spending more than 183 days in a particular calendar year, then they will be considered French resident. Now, if somebody's moving from the UK, that's an area to take advice on, because you can get certain situations where somebody will satisfy the UK residency rules, but they'll also be spending more than 183 days in France, and so they'll satisfy the French residency rules. So fortunately, we've got a treaty that kind of covers these situations. But yeah, it's an area for specialist advice.
Because you could end up paying taxes in both countries.
You could, yeah, and there are situations where that does happen, but you do have the treaty that kind of kicks in. I mean, there's certain types of income, you know, for example, UK rental income continues to be taxed in the UK. That's always the case, even if you move to France. But it also gets brought into the calculation when the French authorities are working out the tax that you might pay on any other income that you've got. So again, it is complex, and it does need planning and advice really to help people understand how it applies to their situation.
I had a question that is, how is property tax treated for a French home that isn't lived in all year round?
Yeah, well, I think so. If we're talking about a second home, you've got, as Alice touched on before, you've got the taxe foncière, which is kind of the property ownership tax that everybody pays if they own a property. If the property is not lived in, if it's an empty property or it's only occupied for parts of the year, you'll also have another tax, which is taxe d'habitation, which is kind of an occupancy tax. Ironically, if you're occupying the property full time, if it's your main residence, you don't pay that tax habitation, it falls away. So that could be one reason or one benefit for somebody actually moving full time into their French property. I think the other thing to consider is that if you're a French resident and or even if you're a UK resident and you have a second home in France, if you later sell that property, then it's going to be assessed for French capital gains tax. Well, if that is your main home, then there's an exemption on capital gains tax. So, you know, that's a clear distinction between somebody's main home and a secondary residence. You know, it really does get treated quite differently when you come to sell it.
In terms of selling, there was a question about tax implications when a French property is later sold or passed on to family members, including inherited property. How does that work?
Yeah, so it depends on the situation. So as we just discussed, if you sell a French property, then it is normally liable for capital gains tax unless it's your main home. So actually, if somebody is a French resident and they sell the property, maybe to gift the proceeds onto their kids or whatever, then there's no capital gains tax in that situation. There might be gift tax, but there would be no capital gains tax. Yeah, I mean, there are always kind of planning options like that when it comes to selling property. When it comes to inheritance, that's a different story. So if somebody's inheriting a French property, regardless of where they are in the world, the beneficiary, the property, because the property is French situated, French sited asset, will be assessed for French succession tax. And so you kind of have, with French succession tax, you have banded rates. So you have a tax-free allowance for children. The tax-free allowance is 100,000 euros for children. It's much less if it's going to somebody who's a more remote relative. So, for example, siblings or nieces and nephews, they don't get anything like the same level of tax-free allowance. And then you kind of have banded tax rates that apply after that. So French succession tax eventually goes up to 45%. That's the top rate. But actually, you know, there's a huge banding at 20%. It's very rare that somebody pays 45% on the whole property. So quite often it can be more favourable than the UK system, which, as many people will know, is it's a 40% flat rate in the UK.
I think fun fact is I think you can't disinherit your kids in France. They have to have part of your inheritance, which I think in England you can. Interesting facts.
Yeah.
There is someone that is asking about share portfolio and can they be transferred or restructured tax efficiently rather than sold outright to avoid a large capital gains bill?
Yeah, we actually encounter this quite a lot. So we meet quite a lot of people that are moving to France that maybe have a UK investment portfolio that's managed by a UK investment manager. And it is quite possible, actually, before you move to France, to actually wrap that investment portfolio without necessarily changing the portfolio itself or changing the manager. You can wrap that into a French compliance structure so that when you move to France, it works really well with the French tax system and has all kinds of benefits in terms of capital gains tax, income tax, and also succession tax. So that's something that we can do. Generally speaking, it is a taxable event. So if you're moving a UK portfolio into such a structure, it does create a tax liability. But normally, the tax liability for somebody who's still UK resident is lower than it is for somebody who is French resident. In the UK, you've got capital gains tax allowances, and you can maybe split the process over 2 years. There are other things you can do as well. I mean, we've had situations where we've actually moved a client temporarily to Malta or to Cyprus for a year before moving them to France, so that they can kind of do the restructuring without paying any capital gains tax. So there are some interesting planning ideas and opportunities there.
I mean, move me to Cyprus. I'll be happy. Yeah, I'll do it. That's fine. That's the best place to move to save some money. So thank you so much, Tom. I know that there's a lot of questions that we didn't manage to go through for Tom. So I know that he will get in touch with some of you separately after this call to answer some of your questions. I think we could spend a whole hour just on tax and wealth planning. So, but let's go over to Chris and how to finance a property purchase, because I'm sure that a lot of you are probably thinking that it's quite complicated, and Chris is here to make it very simple. So Chris, your first question is, what mortgage and financing options are available in France for UK buyers?
So firstly, thank you so much everyone for joining today. Really nice to be speaking to you. I'm Chris Lloyd, Head of Private Clients at NS Global. Now, we do a substantial amount of lending in Europe, and particularly France is such a hotspot for us. Now, the type of lending that we predominantly do is for high net worth individuals because we work very much with the private banks. We've got over 30 private banks to use across all of France. Now, typically what a structure of a French mortgage would look like are very different to the UK. The French banks will lend 100% loan to value against the purchase price or the property value if you're refinancing. And how it would work instead of a deposit, and I really like the way they structure this, is that instead of putting a deposit and therefore having equity in the property, you would put a minimum of €1 million under management with the bank. So typically the minimum loan size we would consider is €1.5 million. You would then, as I said, put $1 million of funds under management with the bank. Now, instead of having this in equity, the beauty of how this works is you could then potentially have this invested and earn a return on the funds under management. So it can work nicely. Now, you would typically have an interest-only mortgage as well. And then instead of making capital reductions over the term, often what clients will do is sort of continue to grow that funds under management. So again, that pot continues to grow. And then at the end of the term, you could either downsize the property or potentially use the funds to repay the loan. But that is typically how we would look at structuring a deal in France. I think you're going to need to come a bit closer to the mic.
Sorry, yeah, coming back very close. Apologies to everyone who is seeing my face very close, but it's that, or you can't hear me. Is it true that it's difficult or even impossible to get a mortgage past a certain age in France?
Absolutely not. And again, this is where our relationships with private banks are. It's very different to how a mainstream lender would look at assessing affordability and looking at a borrower as a whole. The private banks are very relationship driven. Again, by putting funds under management with a bank, you are starting not just a lending relationship, but that wider relationship with the bank. They look at your holistic wealth. So that as long as you've got the ability to pay the mortgage and you've got assets that are sufficient in the background, then there's no typical maximum age that the banks would work to. Again, it's very much down to the client's wealth and looking at the case as a whole. It's not a case of just punching numbers into an online portal and it gets underwritten. It's this real relationship driven lending that we're able to do at NS.
So do lenders accept UK pay slips, contracts and other UK-based document when assessing an application?
Absolutely. And we are not limited to the UK either. We have clients from all over. We particularly have a very strong US client base at the moment looking to buy, holiday homes or properties in France. But again, back to your question regarding UK, absolutely. And again, this is a case that we see quite frequently now is clients not looking to just park their assets in one location. So it will be a case of maybe maintaining a residence in the UK while then purchasing a property in France. Now, going back to what you were saying regarding pay slips and income documents, again, with our private banks, they look very much at a client's holistic, not only income, but wealth. So if you are an employed person, we can absolutely use sort of last 3 months pay slips, last 3 years bonus pay slips, or if you're a self-employed person, we can look at last 3 years tax returns or company accounts to assess affordability, as long as you can show that, if you're maintaining residency in or an asset base in the UK, and then also buying a residence in France, as long as you can show that the overall affordability piece can be met. So demonstrating that you can show monthly payments for a mortgage and lifestyle costs can be met with your wealth, then absolutely we can take income into account no matter where it is in most jurisdictions in the world.
So if I'm thinking about buying a property and talking to you, what documents should I prepare early on?
So often 3 to 6 months personal bank statements showing any income and expenditure. Again, we don't have to just look at clients that have regular income. If you do have that income from either an employment or self-employment, then it's typically last 3 years full income. So if it's employed, then 3 months pay slips to show you that you've got the regular income there, and then last 3 years bonus pay slips. And if you're self-employed, it's last 3 years tax returns and company accounts. If we don't have any regular income, or we're using assets in the background to satisfy affordability as well, then latest statements for your investment portfolios, just so we can see how that's structured and what we can use towards affordability.
And so I know that, again, a question that is more from me rather than from the viewers, but I'm sure everybody will be interested in this. Do you have mortgage in principle, approved in principle in France as well, like you do in the UK? So in the UK, you would go and purchase a property, and obviously you are in a stronger position if you have a mortgage in principle. Is this something that happens in France as well?
I would say that anything that we can provide you, whether you're looking to buy in the UK or France, is much stronger than a decision in principle. Now, it is not a guarantee that the lender will provide you a mortgage. However, we are not a high volume company. We deal very much with bespoke and particularly sort of high net worth or complex mortgages. So the first thing we do is ask for a wealth statement from a client, and just to really understand their income, assets, liabilities, so that we can almost write a mini credit paper, speak with the lender up front. And we usually are speaking with decision makers up front to ensure that, when you then decide to proceed with the transaction, we're not then getting 3 months down the line and having a decline. We make sure that we're putting you with the right lender for your circumstances and requirements. So once we've spoken with a lender and got acceptance to proceed with a mortgage, that's where we can give, solid confirmation to an agent or a seller to say that yes, we are pretty comfortable that, subject to formal underwriting and evaluation and obviously legals, we can deliver on this mortgage. So I would say it's stronger than a decision in principle.
That's great. And Alice, just back to you. I'm guessing if I am a buyer, fell in love with a property, want that property, and there's another potential buyer who doesn't have that document, am I going to be favored when I put an offer in because I have proof of finance?
Absolutely. It makes a big difference to a buyer's offer status, and to the seller's ability to also, and the agent as well, to have confidence in the buyer profile. So an agreement in principle, such as what Chris is talking about, is definitely a big negotiation tool that can be used to help potentially even negotiate a slightly better price, and at least to give confidence to the seller, especially if it's in competition with another.
Thank you. So thank you.
You need to come closer again.
I say, thank you very much. And to speak to you before even putting an offer on a property, so that you know that you can get that property with Alice. So going to Steve and moving currency around, which some people tend to forget until it's time to move the currency around, and then they probably realize that they don't have as much as they think they do because currency has changed. So Steve, over to you. First, some people will just simply transfer their money through a high street bank. What's the difference between using a currency specialist like Lumon or using a bank?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, big differences between our service and the banks. The biggies are, ultimately, if we couldn't save clients money, our industry wouldn't exist. And we move millions a day and billions a year. So I'd be very comfortable that from a transactional perspective, we'll be able to save client money. On top of that, what we're also doing, and to be truthful, what we're most in demand for and seeing our 1,000+ 5-star reviews in the last 12 months, is the hand-holding and education and information around what's moving the market to impact their budget. So as you've kind of alluded to there's a very big difference between the price of a property that they're looking at and fall in love with, or the budget that they start when they start talking to Alice, and the actual cost thereafter if they haven't proactively managed the currency market. So for example, those in the audience or listening to this from the UK, we've seen the pound to euro exchange rate move by 1.5% in the last 30 days. So it can make a significant difference to people's budgets of multi-5-figure sums, if not more, whether or not that's simply increasing your offer or indeed protecting that budget so that dream property becomes a reality.
Very important. You've got that property in mind, and suddenly your money is not worth the same as when you started your search. Is there any cost in opening an account or using a specialist currency broker?
There isn't. No, that's another one of the big misconceptions, that people can't talk to us without a cost. Along the lines with everybody else on the panel this afternoon, we're all offering free consultations with people who want to engage with us to discuss it, review it, and so you can get first-hand experience around the benefits of all of our respective services. No longer does Google count as wealth advice or tax advice or visa advice or currency advice. That's why we're all here to help a client with that goal. Yeah.
Can international funds, including from outside the UK, such as the US dollar, for example, be wired directly as part of a purchase, and what fees are typically involved?
Yes, so we can do third-party payments. So we receive funds and send funds to the notaires, as Alice alluded to earlier, the equivalent of our solicitors in the UK and this side of the channel. So we can make payments through to notaires and have been doing so for 25 plus years. So yeah, last year we received payments from over 500 different notaires offices around France. So we do a lot of this to make those direct payments to make things easy. But the point to highlight there is another misconception perhaps from people is that they can't speak to us unless they've got a French bank account open, which isn't the case. The way that we're regulated and secured for our clients is they can actually buy their currency before they've got a French bank account, or indeed before they found the property through Alice and her wonderful team. People do often. Recently, we saw the pound euro rate reach the highest level we've seen in 13 months. And we've had people come to us and buy the currency before they bought the property. So it's no longer transactional. It's no longer the last thing on the to-do list. It's something to proactively consider as part of your process when you're making that decision and forming that plan.
What point do you decide to purchase that currency? At what point do you think, yeah, that's the most I will get? Let's just do it and buy the currency.
I think I heard the question, but the mic went again. Yeah, it's that information education piece I alluded to. Like all of us on this panel discuss, we've helped tens of thousands of clients do this, so we can help clients avoid the pitfalls and highlight opportunities and risks. Yes, that's why we're all here to help make this as fun and painless experience for everybody to get that place in France.
Great. And so I think you answered that question in some way. When should someone start thinking about their currency transfers, and do they need a French bank account first, which you said you don't need one, and really thinking about it as soon as possible, I'm guessing.
Correct. I imagine that's probably something that a lot of us will probably mention to people. It's start early and start the conversations early so people can plan things appropriately and correctly. For example, there's no such thing as an ISA in Europe. So if you change residency before you've planned that can be a very significant tax cost. So all of us are offering these free consultations. So anybody that's interested to talk more, of course they can do. Yes, please.
And are there some tools available to help people protect themselves against adverse exchange rate movements?
There certainly is, yeah. So there's a number of tools that we offer here over and above of that from the banks that we talked about earlier. Some of those are things called forward contracts, which are in essence are buy now, pay later options. So it allows people to lock in exchange rates while the capital works elsewhere, or while they're waiting for properties to complete or investments to mature. We've got automatic buy orders, so what we call limit orders and stop loss orders. So they go in the market above and below the live position to try and help clients take advantage of any positive movements, or indeed protect them from any negative movements. But yeah, it's that whole package of consultative service to be aware of all these tools, so you can make a more informed, educated decision as to how you manage that currency exposure. What I'd equally add is people don't necessarily need to do it all in one go, obviously, as well. We'll often with clients mirror their risk exposure with their capital exposure, so they can do it in multiple stage payments to get a better average exchange rate when they're timing that. But it's all the things we've been helping people with for a very long time, certainly.
And we've been speaking recently about currency and transfers, and you helping people with making payment. Am I right in saying that you can help people purchase with the property purchase, but you can also help with regular payments such as the mortgage payment, or a smaller payment such as paying the tax that needs to be paid when you're buying a property?
Correct, yes. Please don't just assume we're only here for the larger transfers. We're here for all the requirements a client might have. So whether or not that's thousands to manage and maintain the pool in the sunshine at the moment, which we're all probably desperate to dive into, or whether or not it's managing a a multi-million-pound purchase of a dream property on the Riviera to live the lifestyle we'd all love to.
Mm. So you can save people money at any purchase, international purchase, which is great. And so what's the biggest mistake you see people make with their currency planning?
It's probably those two. Probably people thinking they can't do it because they don't have a bank account, or they think that it's too early in the process to start having that conversation. Unfortunately, we do have occasions where clients, when we're introduced too late and X doesn't equal X anymore, and it can be rather painful for the client. Or indeed other occasions when we've spoken proactively and the property's got an extra bedroom as a result of the currency strategy they've taken. So it can make a significant difference.
Oh, that swimming pool. Beautiful swimming pool.
Yes, please.
I know that it is 5, but I'll do one quick round, but you guys will have to be very quick in answering that question. I think it's a fun one. I'll change it slightly. What do you think is the main reason people are moving to France, or what do you know about it? Alice, what would be the main reason?
There are so many. I've lived here for 14 years. I would go firstly with lifestyle. Outdoor lifestyle is amazing. The food is wonderful. The quality of the food is wonderful. The people I personally love. It takes a while sometimes to get through certain of the French ways of doing things, but I actually, when you're in it, and it's an incredible lifestyle. So that would be my answer.
You went there recently, so what do you think is the main reason?
Well, I don't live in France, but I think I spent about 15 minutes before this webinar started telling you all that my recent trip to Provence was one of the best holidays of my life. So I can absolutely see why people want to move for lifestyle. You've got sunshine, skiing, everything, just good quality of life. So I can see why people all over the globe want to move to France. What a stunning place.
So,
lifestyle, again, yeah, it's all about the lifestyle, food, wine, culture. It's a great place to live as well for accessing the rest of Europe, where we are in the Côte d'Azur. You've got Italy on your doorstep as well. So yeah, it's but I would say lifestyle.
Lifestyle. Tracy.
Oh, well, I've been here for 35 years now. So, and what I'd say is, yeah, obviously we're all going to say lifestyle because otherwise we still wouldn't be here. I mean, for me, even now, walking down the beachfront or going, and having a coffee has got the same, live your best life feeling than it had 35 years ago. But I'd also say a lot of people are moving to France from different countries for healthcare access, which is better in France. So if I was going down the administration route, I would say, access to healthcare, better healthcare, which is a key thing for as we're getting slightly older. And I see this because my clients are getting older with me. Things like that, getting more access to dentists and things like that. I see a lot of my UK clients coming across because of these type of lifestyle changes. They're looking for obviously access to outdoor life, but also to be able to have access to hospitals and doctors when they need it later in life.
Yeah, it does make a big difference. Steve.
Oh, I'll throw something different out there, and I'd say language and family and kids. I only say that 'cause I think my other half would prefer to be French than English. She's fluent and lived out there, and as some of you know, both my kids have got French names because I spend so much time out there. So I'll go with that.
Here you go, we're sold. Thank you so much to all of you for sharing some of your knowledge today. I'm sure that everybody appreciated it, and we'll probably get in touch with you separately because, as I said, unfortunately, we couldn't share all the questions and answer all the questions. A few takeaways from today would be start planning early. Talk to all the experts, speak to the advisors, because that will save you time and probably a lot of money as well. Some decisions you may make would cost you. If you talk to the experts, they will save you a lot of money. Don't leave your mortgage and currency arrangements to the last minute because you found your dream property. This is where a mistake can be made in terms of tax and wealth as well. And so build a team of specialists around you. You've got this wonderful team here that you can reach out to for advice and guidance. So please do. France is an amazing country to live in. So if you are thinking about moving there, then I wish you all the best and enjoy the lifestyle and the sunshine. Here we go. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you to the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Enjoy.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.